I want you to imagine for a moment, holding in your hands everything that matters to you: your home, your relationships, your job, your hopes and plans. The steady rhythms that make life feel secure. Now imagine the ground beneath you shifting. The bank call you did not expect. The diagnosis you feared in the quiet of the night. A betrayal that cuts deeper than you thought possible. The image of losing everything can paralyze the heart, can turn prayer into a whisper and hope into a question. Today we will walk together through that fear, not to offer empty comfort, not to repeat platitudes, but to study what religion in its deepest and most honest forms has taught communities for millennia about fear, loss, endurance, and the faith that can hold us when possessions, plans, and even people are taken away. This is not a lecture. It is a conversation. Honest, theological, pastoral, and practical. It aims to help you sit with your fear, understand its spiritual contours, and learn practices rooted in religious wisdom that strengthen the soul. Fear of loss shows up in many ways. Sometimes it is loud panic attacks, sleepless nights, frantic searching. Sometimes it is a slow erosion numbing, avoidance, a quiet surrender that feels like giving up. From a religious perspective, fear is a teacher as well as a trial. It shows us what we hold most precious. Theologians remind us that worship is always oriented toward that which we treasure most. When the beloved is threatened, so is our worship. But recognizing what we treasure is the beginning of spiritual work. It gives us a place to start. When we name our attachments, we begin to see whether they help us love more fully or keep us from loving God and neighbor with freedom. Religion teaches that not all attachments are bad, but dependency that claims to be ultimate is idolatry. Idolatry can wear many disguises: a bank balance that defines our worth, a relationship that becomes our entire identity, a career that becomes the altar we bow before. When we lose these things, the idol falls, grief rushes in. The religious response to the collapse of idols is not to condemn grief, but to reorient the heart toward the one who is steady. This process is not instantaneous. It is a process of mourning, wrestling, and eventually learning to place trust in something or someone whose hold on us is not dependent on circumstances. An ancient spiritual practice that helps is lament. Lament is not just complaining. It is a disciplined, sacred form of honesty. In the Psalms, laments are full of raw emotion. Accusations, questions, tears. The gift of lament is that it brings pain into the presence of the divine and refuses to pretend everything is fine. If you are afraid of losing everything, begin with lament. Speak your fear. Name the loss you anticipate or have already suffered and place it before God. Lament transforms chaos into a conversation. It does not eliminate pain, but it refuses to let pain become silent isolation. Alongside lament comes the steady practice of remembering. Religious communities hold memory as a sacred act. Remembering God's faithfulness narrowly and specifically counters the universalizing voice of fear that says, everything will be gone and there's nothing to hold on to. Name the concrete ways you have experienced care, provision, unexpected kindness, or survival. Not as magical thinking, but as data. Evidence that life has contained resources beyond your planning. Practically, keep a notebook or voice memo of moments when you were carried through. Return to it in the dark hours. This is not a denial of present suffering. It is a disciplined widening of vision. Another theological anchor is the doctrine of providence, understood in many religious traditions as God's ongoing care for creation. Providence is not a formula that guarantees the preservation of any particular thing. It is an invitation to trust that there is a sustaining purpose larger than immediate loss. That trust is not automatic. It is trained through practice. One of those practices is the daily surrender. A short, repeated prayer or affirmation that gently refocuses the heart away from fearful control toward dependence. This is not passive fatalism. It is an active choosing each morning to place your life and your attachments into a narrative that includes meaning beyond loss. Practical spiritual disciplines matter. Prayer is not a one-size-fits-all. Some people find centering silence restorative. 5 minutes of quiet, breathing, and repeating a simple phrase that centers the heart. Others benefit from active prayer, writing letters to God, journaling prayers, singing, fasting in many religious traditions. This helps the body learn to live without immediate gratification and can recalibrate what feels essential. Community practices confessing fears in a trusted small group, sharing resources with those under stress, transform private anxiety into communal tenderness. When you fear losing everything, do the small, faithful practices that teach your body and mind what it means to rely on more than what you see. Stories have power. Religious scriptures are full of people who lost everything and discovered a deeper resilience. Abraham left homeland and became a model of trust. Job lost children, wealth, health, and yet emerges wrestling with God, not with a tidy answer, but with a renewed presence. The lives of saints and spiritual exemplars across traditions show that loss can be the context in which faith is purified. These stories are not scripts for how your life must go. They are mirrors. They show that human beings can bear great loss and still exhibit courage, love, and surprising joy. However, faith is not a performance. Do not hear me to say that if your trust falters, you have failed spiritually. Doubt is common. It is often the faithful's companion. Even the psalmists and prophets asked hard questions. And Jesus himself cried out from the cross. Doubt voiced honestly can be the soil in which deeper trust grows. The important thing is not the absence of doubt. It is where you bring that doubt into isolation or into prayerful community. One of the most practical moves when facing potential loss is to make a plan that acknowledges uncertainty without letting it dominate your inner life. Practical planning is not the opposite of faith. It's a responsible stewarding of resources. If you fear losing your job, consider updating your resume, reaching out to your network, cutting unnecessary expenses, seeking spiritual counsel. If illness is the threat, gather medical information, consult with trusted doctors, and build a support network. If relationships are fragile, practice truthful conversation, set healthy boundaries. And when reconciliation is not possible, find ways to grieve the loss and repair your heart. Grief work is essential. Many religious traditions offer rituals precisely for this reason. Funerals, memorials, seasons of fasting, days of remembrance. These public acts of grief acknowledge loss as communal and sacred. Create your own rituals if formal ones are unavailable. Light a candle. Write a letter to what you fear losing, and then release it into water or fire safely. Gather with friends to share memories. Rituals give shape to sorrow and prevent it from becoming a hidden poison. Generosity may seem counterintuitive when you fear losing everything. Yet religious wisdom often insists that generosity loosens the tight fist of fear. When you give time, money, listening, you declare that your worth is not contained in possessions. Generosity rewires the heart to trust that there is enough, even when circumstances feel scarce. It is a practice of hope, not reckless, but rooted in the conviction that life is threaded with mutual care. Even small acts, preparing a meal for a neighbor, donating a little money, giving an encouraging message, create a web of reciprocity that strengthens everyone involved. Community is also a buffer against the isolation that fear breeds. Do not isolate. Invite a trusted friend to be with you in the hard nights. Seek pastoral counsel or a spiritual director who can sit with your questions. Join a religious community or small group that practices honesty and mutual care. Communities are not perfect. They are human and can disappoint. But they are also places where practices of love are learned in ordinary difficulty. When you are tempted to hide, remember that most of the spiritual growth that matters happens publicly in the presence of others. Many religious traditions emphasize the necessity of hope, not optimism, which can be naive, but hope as a steady posture that endures pain. Hope is trained by the community and by ritual, by the telling of sacred stories, and by a life shaped by repeated acts of trust. Hope does not deny reality, looks clearly at grief and says, even here, something good is being born. This may be a painful recalibration of priorities, a new dependence on God, or a deeper compassion for others who suffer. The spiritual life often includes seasons of loss that become seasons of formation. Let's be honest about the role of control. Fear of losing everything is often a fear of losing control. Religious practices can help loosen our grip on the illusion of ultimate autonomy. Prayer, confession, and surrender are not invitations to passivity. They are invitations to place your life within a larger story. This story does not always give us the plot points we wanted, but it gives us a context in which our suffering can be held and given meaning. Surrender is painful because it feels like loss of self. But surrender can also open the space for a renewed self, one defined less by possessions or roles, more by character, love, and openness to the divine. A useful spiritual exercise. Write down the things you fear losing. Take a long, calm look at the list. For each item, ask, if this were taken away, what about me would change? Write down the honest answers. Then ask, which parts of who I am are not dependent on these things? Let your answers begin to form a map of what is true about your inner life beyond circumstance. Repeat this exercise monthly. Trains the mind to distinguish between transient possessions and deeper identity. There will be days when your fear is overwhelming. On those days, find one small, faithful act to do. Call someone you love, pray a short prayer, step outside to breathe. Do a 5-minute gratitude practice, cook a simple meal. These small acts are anchors. Do not fix everything, but they slow the nervous system down and create a tiny pocket of safety in which faith can resurface. Spiritual friendship matters. Share your fears with someone who can listen without rushing to fix. A spiritual friend holds your story and interprets it with tenderness. No, they remind you of what you may forget, that you are not alone, that your life has been held before, and that the patterns of grace can repeat. If you are part of a tradition, ask a spiritual leader for resources, readings, prayers, liturgies that speak to loss. If you are alone, seek out online communities or helplines that can connect you to people who care. We must also speak about practical care. Financial ruin is the concern? Speak with a counselor. Create an urgent budget. And know when to ask for practical help from community organizations or religious charities. If mental health is the issue, seek professional help. Faith and psychology can work together. One need not displace the other. In many cases, therapy and spiritual practices combined offer the most robust path to healing. Remember the power of stories of ordinary courage. Around the world, people have lost homes and jobs, and yet within months or years rebuilt lives of meaning. The religious imagination teaches us to see loss as part of a narrative that can include redemption. That does not mean every loss is reversed, but it does mean that meaning is possible even when outcomes are painful. Keep a journal of small signs of life and resilience moments. When you laughed, when someone called, when a small help appeared. These are signposts on the road out of despair. If you are a leader or caregiver listening, your role is to bear witness. Do not rush to platitudes. Sit with people in their fear. Offer practical help. Bring ritual. Be present. Often the most spiritual thing you can do for someone is to witness their pain without trying to fix it. Presence communicates that the person is not alone in their loss. We should also acknowledge that some losses are systemic wrongful evictions, economic collapse, social violence. In those cases, faith demands both consolation and action. Religious traditions often call the faithful to work for justice, to care for the poor, to advocate for fair structures, to love the vulnerable. If your fear of losing everything is rooted in systemic injustice, find others who will act with you. Collective action can change material conditions and provide spiritual solidarity. Toward the end of our time together, let me offer a prayer your heart can use when fear feels overpowering. This is not magic. It is a way of speaking truth into the trembling place. Holy One, I bring you the fear that wakes me at night. I name what I might lose and ask for the courage to mourn. Teach me to hold with open hands, to love without clinging, and to trust in your presence when my world feels small. Grant me the grace to do what I can and to rest what I cannot control. Surround me with companions of truth and let generosity and service be my practice. Amen. Say it aloud if you can. Repeat it often. Here's a final practice. Choose one small spiritual discipline to begin today and commit to it for 30 days. It could be 5 minutes of centering prayer, a short nightly journal entry, a weekly fast from a comfort, or a weekly call to someone who is lonely. Small practices build durable faith. After 30 days, reflect on what changed. Did fear lose some of its power? Did your sense of grounding increase? Use the data to choose the next practice. If this teaching has been meaningful, I invite you to make a small commitment that extends the circle of care. Subscribe to this channel so these conversations can reach more people who need them. Share this video on WhatsApp with a friend or family member who might be carrying a secret fear. Sometimes the simplest message, forwarded in love, becomes a lifeline. I guess the message touched you. Type Luz Interior in the comments. Your words help us know this material is helping hearts. Your engagements, subscribe, share, comment helps these resources travel further and meet someone in a night that feels endless. Loss is real, fear is real. But so are lament, memory, community, ritual, and the practices that form a faith lift strong enough to hold a human being when everything else seems to fall away. Your fear is not a moral failing. It is an invitation to deeper practices of trust. Let grief be honest, let prayer be persistent, let community bear you, and let small acts of faith become the scaffolding of a life that endures. Stay with the practices. Keep naming your fears. Keep seeking care. And remember, you are not standing alone in the dark. There are hands to hold yours, stories to remind you of resilience, and a faith tradition offering resources that have kept people standing for generations. May you find steady ground under your feet and a courage that outlives circumstance.